Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at the absolute monstrosity build that is the Mesmer's Soldier Spear. So this has a unique heavy attack, which is pretty nice, and the other element of it that's really nice is going to be RKR. So Royal Knight's Resolve can be applied to this spear, which just gives you a huge AR boost. And we'll be further boosting that AR with a number of different things. We have the Deadly Poison Perfume Bottle, which allows us to proc poison on ourselves, and then we'll buff that with the Poisoned Hand, the Mushroom Crown, and the Kindred Rot's Exaltation Talisman. Now, after we get the poison procced, we can swap over to the Spear Talisman, but it's definitely not necessary. You're already going to be getting tons of counter damage if your opponent is mid-attack. We'll also boost our AR with the Axe Talisman for fully charged heavy attacks and the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. Now, occasionally you might want to go for jumping attacks, so we have the Black Quill Armor as well as the Claw Talisman, and then we're boosting our AR a bit more with the Rakshasa Greaves and Gauntlets. We also have access to Uplifting Aromatic and Exalted Flesh, but it's worth noting that in the intro, neither of these were used. It was just the poison buff. So let's take a look at these buffs running on this build. We'll go ahead and use the Deadly Poison L2 to get ourselves poisoned, and then we can go ahead, swap over to two-handing our weapon and put RKR on it. And you'll note that we have 1794 damage. So pretty solid, allows you to one-shot with a fully charged heavy attack, especially if your opponent is mid-attack, but we can get that even higher. So let's go ahead and use our Uplifting Aromatic. We can go ahead and use our Exalted Flesh. We will need to restore our FP, because this is a little intensive here, but now we'll go ahead and use our poison, and we'll heal that poison, and then we'll put on RKR and two-hand our weapon. And let's just take a quick look, and my goodness, 2368 damage. So yeah, the buff stacking in Elden Ring is crazy, and obviously that took about 30 seconds, but then you have like roughly 45 seconds with your poison buff. I believe that's the shortest one, aside from RKR, but you can reapply that as needed very easily. And yeah, you can just delete people's HP bars. So we'll be running this in the arena a little bit, as well as during invasions too. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd definitely appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the one-shot build. Alright, so to start things off, we're going to be outside the Malekith boss room, and we'll just apply RKR. That's all we've got in terms of our buffs, and we'll get a nice counter damage for a little over 1100 damage, and just one-shot that Phantom. It's no big deal. You know, we don't really need all the buffs in the world, and it's worth noting that this build is not really a glass cannon. Like, yeah, you have low poise, but you still have 60 vigor, and you're not really giving up that much. You can still run a physic that involves, you know, just defensive tiers. We don't need to use that to further buff this, and you'll get very consistent either one-shots or consistent two-shots, as we can see with this light rolling player. We're going to be focusing on the light rolling player, and it's also worth noting that getting in freezing pots can be a great way to lower your opponent's physical damage negation, which is just further going to boost this build. So I think it's nice to be able to incorporate the jumping attacks as well as the fully charged attack. It's not always practical to be getting those off, and you do get some hyper armor, but since you're running pretty low poise, it can be helpful to just have multiple options, and you know, you still just go for a jumping light attack and get over 1000 damage. So following it up with a Misericord is not super tricky, and it's just a great way to, you know, have another option for quick damage at your disposal. You will also note that I do have Stormblade on that Misericord, and that can also be a really nice element of the build, just because you get some long-range damage in the form of a projectile, which is super helpful. So we go ahead, apply our poison buff, and we go for the fully charged heavy attack, and they are mid-attack, so that means that we can get the counter damage as well that comes innately with pierce type damage, and that's going to just delete their HP bar. So it is tough to get the entire chain off, and also it is just functionally a vigor check for many players, and we find out that, yeah, a lot of people are not running 2000 HP, and even if they are, it doesn't super matter, because we either one or two-shot them very consistently. So here we only got the second part of that fully charged heavy attack, but we can just follow it up with a light jumping attack, and we'll finish off all the damage that we need. Really landing the full thing while your opponent is trying to attack you is going to be the best option for delivering the most damage possible, because that Spear Talisman, as well as just the counter hit it just adds up to be a lot of damage. So this next one, we're going to be dealing with 3 opponents, and they're coming in hot and heavy. We really need to back off here, get some PvE involved to hopefully just give us some breathing room, and that does work quite well. And we'll go ahead and apply our poison buff. So you don't always have the immediate opportunity to get all your buffs in, but the fact that you have different buffing options and the fact that RKR is very easy to get buffed very quickly means that like you always have good buff options at your disposal, and this weapon just does a ton of damage. So there we didn't one-shot that player because we weren't two-handing the spear, so it's important to definitely two-hand. And here we can see the effectiveness of two-handing that as we go for one hit that hits the shield and gets the guard break, and the second hit does over 1100 damage. So yeah, like this is just super strong. This spear is super strong, charged attacks are super strong, the axe talisman goes super hard, and RKR is like in the mix again, which is super fun to see. Now this player is going to be running off, and they're going to be using Moonveil that they have buffed a little bit with their physic. Here we whiff our jumping attack, which would have finished them off, especially because of the counter damage, and we go for a heavy attack. It doesn't connect, but we are able to trade with another jumping attack and finish them off. So effectively two-shotting that player. Yeah, like this build is so much fun to run. I don't think I could run it for like a month straight because it's kind of one-dimensional, but I think for just, you know, messing around, doing crazy damage. Also, if you wanted to run this in PvE, like you can get all this buffs off ahead of time before you walk through the boss fog and just, you know, do crazy amounts of damage very easily. This type of thing is super successful in both PvE and PvP. So this next one, we came up the ladder to just a horrible situation where we just have Stars of Ruin being spammed at us, which is not so bad if you can strafe it, but it's very hard to strafe when you have somebody with a very easy chase down weapon with this Colossal Sword, and you're just in this like very narrow strip with no where to hide. So we're going to take advantage of this tiny little wall, and we actually have a moment to buff, and we can use that opportunity to get off Uplifting Aromatic, and then just one Jumping Heavy attack will do the trick to finish off the player with Colossal Sword, and that gives us some time alone with this host here that would not stop spending Stars of Ruin in our direction, and we just give them a wave goodbye. This next one is some players that were definitely ganking in this area before the right guard boss room, so we use RKR, get off a nice 1700 damage before we lose our iframes, and then here as the Phantom continues to swing, we go for some crouch attacks followed up by just a fully charged heavy attack, and yeah, 2 for the price of 1 works out quite well. Now, this next opponent, you'll notice, has something special going on with them. This Phantom does not take any damage whatsoever, so definitely a player that was cheating, which honestly is tough to see, especially when you've got this one-shot build. You're all ready to go for the one-shot, you're ready to do 2,000 damage in a single hit, but when they don't take any damage, it kind of nerfs your build a little bit. So that's unfortunate. We're going to get off some of our buffs, and we're no longer going to be focusing on the player that's impossible to kill. In these moments, like perhaps you can go for gravity, but here a fully charged, fully buffed jumping attack does not do the trick against that player. So we're fully aware that, you know, it was not some sort of latency issue. They're just not taking damage, and we can focus on the host a little bit. A jumping attack for 880 damage. They've only got just shy of 1,000 vigor, so we're going to go ahead and finish them off with another follow-up attack. And here we can just see the Phantom was, you know, totally not killable. You know, Blight is a good option if you have the build for it, Gravity if you have the build for it, but sometimes it's just worth it to kill the host and move on. So next up we're going to have a 2v1, and this host sees us go for all our buffs and just does the collapse emote, which really cracked me up. And then this player is going to be rolling away. We get 2 hits in with a fully charged heavy attack, manage to break their guard and follow it up with the rest of the damage we need. So now it's just a one-on-one. This player is rune arced, so that is worth noting, and we go for a fully charged heavy attack, but we get knocked out of it, so the Colossal Sword is going to be effective at that. We're trying to line up some of our fully charged heavy attacks, just trying to space appropriately. We don't get it quite there in that moment as they go for their Ash of War, and we collect some damage, but we're going to use RKR again, see what we can do. Not get too aggressive, and I would say that's the best play style for this. Like, obviously you want to get your damage in where you can, but don't try to be like too one-dimensional about it. Like, use the moveset available to you, don't just go for fully charged heavy attacks over and over again. Obviously, you know, you're kind of on a ticking timer after you apply your buffs, but you know, it's not going to be helpful to have your buffs if you just go for 2 fully charged heavy attacks, miss all of them, and then die. It's much better to just use your buffs when you can, incorporate different things in short moments, like the uplifting aromatic as well as the exalted flesh, and just really make things happen. So here they make the mistake of going for a fully charged heavy attack. We're able to space that and get the counter damage on it for our fully charged heavy attack and finish them off in a single shot. So yeah, we can see here just like we're not always fully buffed with poison. I don't know, you could make this, I think, a lot less glass cannon-y. I think you could get rid of some of the armor and make it a little bit more tanky, and just use RKR with maybe Exalted Flesh and the Axe Talisman. I think you'd be in business for doing a ton of damage. If you wanted to incorporate Iron Jar Aromatic, that's another fun way to do this, where you could really just not get poise broken, which would be great. I don't know if you have enough time to go for Endure followed up by a fully charged heavy, but it's another possible idea. I think you can just have a ton of fun with the Mesmer Soldier Spear, just given the fact that the fully charged R2 comes out in 2 hits and, you know, is a spear, so you get the counter damage, and it's just crazy. Here's a nice fun one where we go for the fully charged heavy and then the second fully charged heavy, and get the follow-up to strike as they are going for Flaming Strike, and that's going to do, you know, everything we need it to. This next one, I always think it's fun when you have players that are just fully prepared to mash into you as you spawn in, and then you just kind of pull out your fully charged heavy attack as they're going for Palm Blast or something, and yeah, it just does the work for you. It is worth noting that, like, invasions are still kind of tricky. Like, there's so many different ways to take damage, and obviously it's nice to be able to one-shot players, but you have to actually land your hit, and especially with the fully charged heavy, like, that's not a super consistent thing to land. So yeah, like, I definitely lost invasions while running this build, and it's fun to make it happen, but you know, you still have to try, you still have to dodge incoming damage, you still have to wait for your turn, and it's just, it's an interesting way to play the game. There was some times where just like Mesmer Spear was not the way to go. They were either light rolling or playing super passive, and I would spend a while trying to get the fully charged heavy attack to connect. It wouldn't happen, so I'd swap over to something like Paired Curve Swords or Backhand Blade, and that was just much more the right tool for the job. So this is not always going to be the right tool for the job, and not overly committing to just using a two-handed spear can be really helpful. Sometimes you need quick chip damage, sometimes you need quick burst damage, which, like, you can get with the jumping attacks, but sometimes you need it at range. Like, you know, I think a good invader will have a multitude of tools at their option, or a multitude of options in their tool belt at all times, and that's not really what this is. So it does make invading a bit of a challenge in that respect, even though you are doing insane damage, like 1475 on a single jumping heavy. So yeah, it's fun. We're going to focus now on some duels. I'm just going to put in some music because I think you kind of know what the deal is by this point. It's super fun to try this in duels. I imagine that I got blocked by every player that I encountered afterwards, which is totally fair. I get it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the build. If you have any questions, let me know. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day.